Hello everyone, this is Zach Elliott at Feel Free to Argue. And the book you see on your screen now is one that I read recently and had a fairly profound impact on me. And I wanted to read a particularly illustrative section which I think explains very clearly why our current strategy for attempting to control terror will not work. And I think it shows it very clearly. It was drizzling in Mosul when I arrived. Broken glass was splayed across the pavement. The truck had been towed away. Two American soldiers with the 101st Airborne had climbed into a regular SUV, no armor, and driven off the base and into Mosul at rush hour. They were supposed to have known better than to go out alone. One of the soldiers was Jerry Wilson, 45, of Thompson, Georgia, the brigade's command sergeant major, meaning he was the unit's senior enlisted man. The other was Corporal Rel Ravago IV, 21, from Glendale, California. The insurgents started following Wilson and Ravago the minute they drove off the base. They were in a car just in front of the Americans, and in the heavy traffic they suddenly stopped. Another car trailing just behind the Americans pulled up to their rear bumper. The soldiers couldn't move. The insurgents got out of their cars and with their Kalashnikovs shot them in the head. A crowd of Iraqis had gathered around the executed Americans, dragged the bodies out of the car, and stripped them of their watches, jackets, and boots. The Americans said initially that the soldiers' throats had been cut too, which caused a sensation in the United States because it revived memories of Somalia in 1993. The next day, though, the military took back the statement. After checking out the scene of the attack, I walked up the street to Ras Al Jada fire station, one of the new ones built by the Americans. It was a big brick building, with 3 wide garage doors and 3 brand new, bright red fire engines inside. It was very American. I performed a quick mental calculation and figured the renovation and the new trucks had cost about $1 million. Milling around the front of the fire station were the firemen themselves, dressed in brand new flame-retardant suits and boots. They looked very sharp and well-groomed, like firemen in the United States. I asked the Iraqis about their salaries, of which they were especially proud. These had risen tenfold since the Americans had toppled Saddam, they said, and they'd completed a 6-week training course to learn how to operate the fire engines. I asked the firemen what had happened down the street. The firemen had seen the whole thing, they said. Oh yes, absolutely. All of them had walked down the street to watch with everyone else. I was happy. Everyone was happy, Wadala Muhammad, one of the firefighters, told me. The Americans, yes, they do good things, but only to enhance their reputation. They are occupiers. We want them to leave. The rest of the firefighters chimed in. There were 6 of them, not the least bit hostile. Yes, yes, they said. We were cheering when we saw the dead Americans. Who did it? I asked them. The men shrugged. The Americans are not popular in Mosul, one of the firemen said. From the fire station, I drove to the American base in downtown Mosul, the same base from which Command Sergeant Major Wilson had departed. I wanted to ask the commander about Mosul, since, until then, it had been something of an American success story. The 101st Airborne, under the command of Major General David Petraeus, had spent more money on public works projects than any other unit. The streets were calm. Mosul was the model of how a successful counterinsurgency campaign, with its emphasis on political and economic factors, could be carried off. I reject the idea that things have gone bad here, Colonel Joe Anderson told me. He was in command of about 5,000 soldiers in the heart of the city. Most of the Iraqis are glad we are here, and they are cooperating with us. The Iraqis lied to the Americans, no question. But the worst lies were the ones the Americans told themselves. They believed them because it was convenient, and because not to believe them was too horrifying to think about. So if you're like me, you probably found that whole story rather disturbing. And I'm willing to bet that for a lot of you, it even made you quite angry. thinking about how ungrateful the Iraqis are. But my point about this is that you can't do any good work as an occupying army. You can't. It is impossible. And all you're going to do is set up yourself for failure. Because there will be a resistance. They will blow up your good works, and they'll do it just because you made them. And yes, they will cut their nose to spite their face. If you build them a fire station, its only purpose to, put out fires, they'll blow it up. They'll blow up the school to teach the children. They'll blow up the hospital. And they'll do it just because you put it there. Now you can say this is unreasonable, that they should just get with the program. If they just took the benefits that we gave them, that they'd be much better off. Everybody would be much better off. But I think this is just the wrong way to think about it. Because even if that's true, that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is what happened there. In Mosul. And which happens all the time in, Iraq and in Afghanistan and probably in Pakistan as well. You can't impose anything on another country. You can't impose democracy. You can't impose a fire station. You can't impose a school. And I guess what I want people to get away from is the whole notion that you can force anyone to do anything, or even that you should expect them to be grateful for it if you try. Because I think this is a large part of our problem. Any number of times I've heard people talk about the Iraqs and the Afghanis as being ingrates, as being unwilling to accept the largesse that we are offering. And I guess I would just counsel people to put the shoe on the other foot and think about how they would feel, though I imagine a lot of people can't even conceive of this situation, can't even imagine it for themselves. But try to imagine what it would be like if a Muslim country dominated us and basically dictated every aspect of our lives to us. How would you feel about that? Would you trust the school the Muslims built? Even if they were, taking pretty good care of you. Wouldn't the whole point be that it was imposed? That it wasn't what you had chosen? Wouldn't you hate them, regardless of what they did? I think you would. Because people really aren't that different. They're willing to put up with the shit they have a lot better if it's the shit they chose. And they don't care if your shit is bitter. Your shit is better. They don't. They want the future they chose for themselves. Just the way you would. It's been Zach Elliott, and you can feel free to argue.